how excited people got with their information, and that they have now become truly imprisoned by their sense of entitlement that their information is right. And they're imprisoned by their entitlement because what is so funny is that if you actually drill into many people's issues, you realize that first of all, they don't have under any understanding of history, and that usually someone has actually fed them a bold lie that begins the whole premise of what they believe. And usually the lie is always an exaggeration. So, for example, I love this one is women's rights. I just sat with a gorgeous individual on a plane ride, and we started getting into a discussion. And it started with her basically dissing me for saying, well, a guy at your age wouldn't understand what I believe in. And when she said that to me, I immediately go, you don't get away with that. Uh-uh. We rumble on that one. What do you mean? And so it came down with that she felt that was totally insensitive to women's rights. And then we rumbled into how I grew up. And since my parents were actually very prolific in working with sexual freedom and women's rights, and you can look them both up. My mom was the British actress Anne Haywood, and my father was the British film producer Raymond Stross, and they made very controversial movies. So what's so funny is these people fall into this trap of thinking I don't know what the sexual revolution is about. And then we can start going back in history. And what's funny is this individual said, well, IBM in the 50s basically clamped down on women's rights and basically destroyed women's rights. And it all was in the 50s and the 60s. And you guys didn't, and it's your generation that really screwed things up. And I went, well, that's really interesting. I said, because frankly, if you're not aware of this, there was two huge issues that occurred, and the culture of IBM occurred because of these two big issues. And she goes, what are the issues? I said, two world wars. And in World War, regardless if you like it or not, women are considered vital to a country's ability to repopulate. And regardless of how many rights you think you have or you don't have, if I'm in charge of that country, I'm making sure that I can repopulate after the war. So I'm not sending all my women to the front line. Sorry, not doing that. That is a really dumb idea. Number two, which is so interesting about this, is that then I said, but you're forgetting something. Prior to World War One, the Roaring Twenties, women had the most amount of rights because of the suffragettes that actually fought for their rights that women had ever had. And then World War One and Two came, and new ideas were brought in to protect the woman. We put the women into factories so they would stay home, and we tried not to have them go to the front lines. Some did, but only a percentage, because we had to make sure we could repopulate. And then I look at this individual and I said, so what's wrong with that? What is wrong with that societal issue? And it's true, IBM definitely wanted to make the men, when they came back from World War II, feel wanted as in heroes. So maybe they overcompensated, but what did you want those men to feel like when they came back from World War II? So it's so easy for people to say how effed up IBM was for their policies. But until you've lived World War II, until you've lived what America went through at that period in time, you really do not have a right to conflict that to today and say today is that and that is today. It isn't. The reasons for that were completely different than the reasons we today are arguing. We're arguing today over social media and mobile being able to feed us the world's information without filter and designed and also has algorithms designed to make us stay on those devices. That's what we're dealing with today. That has nothing to do with World War One and Two. This is such an important point. Before you go on a soapbox and start proclaiming how bad people are, then what good was all my parents' efforts to make the first movies that they had to go to the Supreme Court to have the movies shown in the United States? What good would those efforts have been if we're going to dismiss them based on standards today? This is insane. Because when my parents did what they did, they were fighting like heck for people to have the right to see their movies.
Right.
So,
And social media gives us a very out of context view sometimes where we only see a short clip or we only see a headline or we only see our funnel's version of that context. And people tend to formulate an entire opinion based on that snapshot they may see and not understand that there's a lot more history to it. There are a lot of other representations within that. And if you look at that information with a preconceived bias, you are likely to take offense or to just put it off because it disagrees with your narrative, rather than the
right,
quest to understand, the quest to dissect, the quest to determine whether or not it's even factual. Because there's an entirely additional dynamic of not all news is factual. It's not required to be. Journalism is no longer reporting facts, it's often reporting opinions. But because they're on these prestigious sites or papers, people still consider that factual. So it can skew our perspectives, and obviously, all the way down to our human interactions, where we assume a lot about information and people and their opinions without taking the time to really research and understand where that opinion is coming from, whether that is the complete opinion or a snapshot of it, and also all the different layers and dynamics that contribute to it. So, lots to talk about there with our perception of reality and how social media sometimes skews that.